In every town there are rules, some written, some whispered. But then, there are rules no one dares to explain. Rules that sound like stories meant to scare children, but aren't. Tonight, you'll hear from 8 people who broke their town's one sacred rule and found out why it existed in the first place. Okay, this one still gives me chills because it feels like it could happen to anyone. It's from a woman named Ellie, small suburban town, nothing special, until this one night. So, Ellie's house sat at the end of this long gravel driveway. You know, the kind where you hear every single crunch if someone's walking on it, which is exactly how this story starts. It was late, like everyone's in bed except you scrolling on your phone in the dark kind of late. Ellie's parents were asleep, house was dead quiet, and she was just mindlessly browsing TikTok with her headphones in. Then she felt it. Not heard it. Felt it. That gut instinct that something's not right. She pulled her headphones off and just listened. Crunch. One footstep. Crunch. Another. Slow, deliberate, coming up the gravel driveway. Now, this wasn't totally unusual. They'd get the occasional raccoon, maybe a lost dog. But this sounded heavy, like bootsteps. Ellie peeks through her bedroom window, heart pounding, expecting maybe some drunk neighbor stumbling around. But instead, there's this man, standing at the very end of the driveway, just outside the range of the porch light. She couldn't see his face, just this shape. Here's where it gets weirder. He wasn't moving, not pacing, not looking around, just standing, like he knew she was watching. She grabs her phone, about to call her dad. Looks back, and he's gone. No footsteps, no retreating crunch of gravel, just gone. Her dad searched around with a flashlight, nothing. They even checked security cameras in the morning. No one ever showed up on the footage. Just static at the exact time she saw him. Ellie said after that, she never trusted quiet nights again, because sometimes they're too quiet. Alright, so this next one, it messed me up for a while. It's from a guy named Marcus, grew up in this tiny farm town upstate. You know the kind. One gas station, a diner where everyone knows your name, and this one massive apple orchard that was the place for everything. Festivals, school trips, you name it. But there was this weird rule everyone followed without question. Don't go into the orchard after sundown. Not fenced off, no security, just an unspoken line. You don't cross it. Marcus was a skeptic, thought it was just a way to keep teens from sneaking in and partying. So one summer night, after a bonfire with his friends, he decided to test it, just to prove it was all nonsense. He told his friends, "I'm gonna go pick the world's most haunted apple," and hopped the low stone wall. At first, it was fine. The orchard looked normal, even in the dark, but the deeper he went, the quieter everything got. No bugs, no wind, like the whole place was holding its breath. Then he noticed the ground was soft, not like dirt, more like stepping on a mattress that sinks a little too much. He crouched down, and that's when he saw it. The ground wasn't just dirt. It was this layer of fine, grayish threads like cobwebs, but alive. They moved when he touched them, and then he heard it, a wet, dragging sound, not fast, not slow, just steady. Something was moving between the trees, and it was heading straight for him. Marcus noped out of there, sprinted back toward the wall. But with every step, that sinking ground tried to hold him, like the earth was swallowing his feet. He didn't dare look back. He barely made it over the wall when the noise stopped. The orchard went back to its usual self. Silent, still, like nothing happened. Here's the kicker, though. The next morning, his shoes were gone, just his socks, and the soles of his feet were stained gray as if the orchard left a little reminder. He never went back after dark. You ever hear about those weird local legends that sound so ridiculous, no one really takes them seriously? That was the man in the field for us. It was this old tale people used to tell at bonfires about a man who would stand in the middle of a cornfield, perfectly still, at night. People said if you saw him, you were supposed to run. No explanation, just run. My cousin Jamie and I used to joke about it every summer. What's he gonna do? Glare us to death? We thought it was just an old farmer scare tactic to keep kids out of the fields. But that summer, man, that summer was different. It was late July, brutally humid. Jamie's family owned a small patch of farmland on the outskirts of town, mostly overgrown with wild corn and weeds. One night, we dared each other to go into the field after dark, just to prove how much we didn't believe in the man. We brought flashlights, not the good kind either, those old plastic ones with dim yellow beams that barely cut through the darkness. As we stepped into the field, the air felt heavy, not in a dramatic, haunted way, just dense, like it was holding its breath. The corn stalks were taller than we expected, bending and whispering in the wind, which wouldn't have been creepy if the air wasn't completely still. We didn't see anything for a while, just endless rows of corn. Jamie kept making dumb jokes to lighten the mood, but after about 15 minutes, we noticed something. A shape, not moving, just standing. It was maybe 50 feet ahead, barely lit by the moon. We thought it was a scarecrow at first, but as we got closer, the shape became off. Too lanky, arms too long, and no crossbeam behind it. Jamie whispered, "That's a person." I remember laughing, like it was nervous, but still, laughing. No way, someone's pranking us. We shined our weak little flashlights at him, and that's when my stomach dropped. His head turned, slow, like it was attached to rusty hinges. I can't describe the way he looked exactly. It wasn't grotesque or monstrous. That's what made it worse. He looked human, but wrong, like he was wearing a human costume that didn't quite fit. Jamie whispered, "Dude, we need to go." The moment those words left his mouth, the man started walking, not running, just walking, but fast. Every step seemed to close the distance way too quickly. We didn't even think. We bolted through the rows, crashing through corn and weeds, not caring about the scratches or where we were heading. Behind us, we could hear the soft crunch of footsteps, unhurried. He wasn't chasing us, just following. When we finally burst out of the field and into the backyard, the footsteps stopped. We turned back. No one was there, but in the middle of the field, one corn row bent as if someone was still standing there, watching. We didn't sleep that night, and we never, ever talked about the man in the field again. Jason wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. He was a straightforward, no-nonsense guy, the kind who'd roll his eyes at anything even remotely paranormal. So when he and his friends planned a weekend getaway at a remote log cabin deep in the woods, the only thing on his mind was fishing and drinking, not some spooky campfire tales. The cabin was isolated, the kind of place where GPS gives up halfway and the rest of the journey is just dirt paths and blind trust. The first night went by as expected. A fire pit, some cheap beer, the usual dumb stories guys tell when they're trying to one-up each other. But the second night, that's when things shifted. It was around 2:30 in the morning. The fire had died down hours ago, and everyone else had knocked out cold. But Jason couldn't sleep. There was something about the night that felt wrong. It wasn't the kind of quiet that relaxes you. It was suffocating, tense, like the woods were holding their breath. He found himself staring out the cabin's front window, watching the tree line dissolve into pitch-black nothingness. That's when he noticed it. Movement. At first, he figured it was just an animal, a deer maybe, but then it stood up. It wasn't a deer. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall. Its limbs looked too long, like they had been stretched. The way it moved was even stranger, like a puppet with strings being pulled just a bit too late, giving it this jerky, disjointed sway as it crept closer to the cabin. Jason's gut told him to wake someone up, so he shook his friend Kyle awake, whispering for him to take a look. Kyle was a skeptic too, but the moment his eyes adjusted, he froze. "What the hell is that?" Kyle muttered, eyes glued to the window. The figure had stopped, just at the edge of the porch light's reach. It stood there, half shrouded in darkness, close enough to make out the elongated outline of its arms, but too far to see its face. And then it tapped. Not on the window, not on the door, but on the wall. A slow, deliberate tap, 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 like it was testing the wood, feeling out its next move. The sound was so faint it could have been imagined, but both Jason and Kyle heard it. Jason's heart was pounding. His instinct screamed at him to stay quiet, to not move. But Kyle, never one to back down, grabbed a flashlight, marched to the door, and flung it open. The porch was empty, no footsteps, no movement. The woods were still. But just as they exhaled, trying to rationalize it, the tapping returned, from the back of the cabin. The two scrambled to the rear window, but there was nothing, just the suffocating black of the woods pressing against the glass. The tapping continued, rhythmic and taunting. They didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Jason swears the tapping didn't stop until the first crack of dawn. The moment sunlight hit the treetops, it vanished, like it had never been there. They packed up and left before breakfast, and Jason has refused to set foot near that forest ever again. It was supposed to be a quick hike. Lena and her brother Mark were both outdoorsy types. They'd grown up hearing the old stories about Devil's Ridge, a steep, winding trail in their hometown that older folks warned kids to stay away from after dark. Supposedly, back in the early 1900s, a man would walk those woods carrying an old lantern, luring people off the trail, and they'd vanish without a trace. But that was just a story. At least, that's what Lena thought. It was late afternoon when they set off. The sun hung low, painting the sky in that perfect golden hour glow. The trail was tougher than they remembered, though. The trees were dense, and the path twisted in weird, almost disorienting patterns. But they were experienced hikers. This was their thing. About an hour in, Mark noticed something odd. The air felt heavier, like it was thicker somehow. And then Lena pointed it out. A faint light flickering through the trees, way off the path. At first, they thought it was another hiker, maybe someone camping off trail. But as they watched, the light started moving. Not fast, but steady. Floating. It wasn't the harsh beam of a flashlight. It was soft, like an old oil lantern. "We should check it out," Mark said. Lena wasn't so sure, but curiosity got the better of them. They veered off the path, pushing through the underbrush as quietly as possible. But no matter how far they walked, the light always stayed the same distance ahead, just out of reach. It was like it was leading them somewhere. That's when Lena realized they couldn't hear the usual forest sounds anymore. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of their own footsteps. Suddenly, the light stopped moving. It hovered near an old, collapsed tree, casting long, eerie shadows. Mark raised his hand to signal they should slow down, but before he could say a word, the light went out. Pitch black. Lena's heart jumped into her throat. She spun around, but the trail was gone. They were surrounded by trees that all looked the same, and in that moment, she knew they were lost. Then, a new light appeared. But this time, it wasn't ahead of them. It was to their right, and it was closer. Mark whispered, "Did it move?" Before Lena could respond, a figure stepped into the faint glow of the lantern. It was a man, tall, lanky, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. But there was something wrong. His head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was barely attached, and his free arm dangled uselessly at his side. The man stood silently, holding the lantern up high, his face never fully visible in the flickering light. Lena and Mark didn't wait to see what would happen next. They bolted, twisting, turning, ducking under branches, not caring which direction they were running, just as long as it was away from that figure. After what felt like hours, they burst back onto the trail, gasping for air. The sun had completely set by then, but they didn't stop running until they reached their car. When they finally looked back at the ridge, there was a single flickering light in the distance, swaying gently, like it was watching them leave. They never went back. Danny had driven that stretch of road 1,000 times. Old Pine Road was a quiet back road that snaked through miles of dense forest. No lights, no houses, no other cars most nights. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and trees pressing in on both sides. It was his shortcut home from the late shift, but on this particular night, as Danny glanced at his dashboard clock, he noticed it had been stuck on 2:47 a.m. for the past 10 minutes. He frowned, tapped the glass, thinking it was just a glitch. His phone, however, read the same, 2:47 a.m. That's when he noticed the whistling. It wasn't coming from his radio, which was off. It wasn't from his car, either. This was a clear, deliberate whistle, a simple tune, like a lullaby, but slow and drawn out. At first, he thought it might be in his head. He rolled down the window to shake it off. That's when it got louder. It wasn't coming from a specific direction. It was just there, like the air around him was vibrating with it. He sped up. The road seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how far he drove, the trees never broke. There should have been a fork in the road by now, but it never came. The whistling, though, never stopped. It rose and fell, like someone was circling his car, keeping pace with him at 60 miles per hour. Danny's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Every instinct told him to keep driving, but his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. That's when he saw it. A figure standing dead center of the road behind him. Not running, not chasing, just standing, tall, impossibly thin, with elongated arms that nearly scraped the ground. Its head was tilted up, and even though Danny was speeding away, the figure remained the same size in his mirror. It wasn't fading into the distance, and it was whistling. Panic set in. Danny floored it, 70, 80 miles per hour, his little sedan shaking as he tore down the endless stretch of road. His breath came in sharp gasps, but the figure never disappeared from the mirror. Then, the headlights flickered. The car stuttered, lights cutting out for a split second before flickering back on. In that moment of darkness, Danny felt it. Something was inside the car. He didn't see it, but every hair on his body stood on end. The whistling wasn't outside anymore. It was in the back seat. He dared a glance into the mirror, empty, but the whistling, now softer, closer, was right behind his ear. Danny jerked the wheel instinctively. The car skidded, slammed to a halt sideways across the road. Silence. The clock flicked over to 2:48 a.m. When he stepped out of the car, shaking, the road ahead was normal again. The familiar fork was there. The forest was still. The whistling was gone. He never took Old Pine Road again. This one comes from Jamie's older cousin, Mark. The guy's ex-military, super level-headed, not the type to get spooked easily, but even he swears this happened. Mark had just moved into a small rental cabin near a lake, one of those secluded spots people dream about for weekend getaways. Only, he was staying long-term, alone. It was the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is a 10-minute drive away. Anyway, one night, around 3 a.m., Mark was sitting on the porch, just enjoying the silence. No phone, no distractions. Just him, a beer, and the sound of the lake. That's when he heard the knock. It was sharp, deliberate. 2 knocks, coming from the side of the cabin. Not the front door, not the back, but the wooden wall itself. He stood up, flashlight in hand, and called out. No response. Another knock. Same place. 2 knocks again. Knock, knock. Mark, thinking it was probably an animal, circled around with his flashlight. Nothing, not even footprints in the dirt. He went back inside, locking the doors. Maybe 15 minutes passed. All quiet. Then, knock knock, this time from the opposite side of the cabin. Mark snapped up, heart racing now. He checked the windows, but it was pitch black outside. The flashlight didn't catch anything, just the endless dark. But here's where it gets weirder. The knocks started moving. First the side wall, then the back of the cabin, then near the roof. Always 2 knocks, always slow, rhythmic, as if someone was walking around the cabin, tapping as they went. Mark grabbed his rifle, ready to confront whatever this was, but every time he flung open the door, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. It's like it only existed when he wasn't looking at it. Then came the final knock. On the front door this time. Mark didn't open it immediately. He waited, listening. And that's when he heard it. A little girl's voice. Software innocent. "Can I come in now?" Mark said. His blood ran cold. He aimed the rifle at the door, his finger trembling on the trigger, but his gut told him not to open it. The girl's voice didn't repeat. No more knocks, just silence. He stayed up until sunrise, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the door. When he finally opened it in the daylight, there was no sign anyone had been there. No footprints, no damage. But across the door's wooden surface, dead center, were 2 small handprints, pressed into the wood. Not smudged, not dirty, indented, as if they had been part of the door all along. Mark left that cabin the same week.